Hey, so I've just come back from Guiyang, which is the provincial capital of Guizhou. Fantastic city, and I would recommend it. It's called the cool city in China, but there's a place there called Qinling Shan Park. You can see macaques, tigers. I even saw my first Chinese panda right up close, so that was cool. It's kind of a small zoo, but it's actually a decent zoo as Chinese zoos go. I mean, the environment's quite good. But anyway, that's not what this video was about. This video is about the situation in Pakistan right now, and it's tragic. It's also deeply frustrating. So a while back, there was a prominent case, and this case has reached its conclusion that is involving a Christian woman by the name of Asia Bibi. And basically, she had been accused of blasphemy, and there was legal wrangling going on for years over this, over her prosecution for supposed blasphemy. Now, it's just been ruled by a high court that she's actually innocent of the charge, and she has been acquitted. So in theory, she's free, um, but in reality, she's not. What is disgraceful is the response of the Imran Khan administration insofar as she is now being forbidden from leaving Pakistan, so she's not actually free. Because as long as she is on Pakistani soil, her life is at risk. There are Neanderthal, and that's an insult to Neanderthals, there are primitive, thuggish, religious knuckle draggers roaming the streets right now of Pakistan, setting fire to buildings, smashing up cars, generally causing mayhem because they're so infuriated that the weak little egos can't handle the fact that a woman has been acquitted. Thousands of weak, gutless, sick little men demanding the blood of one woman. For what? For perceived blasphemy, which she wasn't even guilty of. Now, this is just a reminder that Pakistan has a very, very long way to go to drag itself into the 21st century. I had a post on Facebook about how I felt about this, and a Pakistani guy that I know responded. Now, I didn't really know how he would respond because when I saw, friend typing, kind of speculated that there would be that because I was quite blunt. I said that this shows that Islam is not a tolerant religion. And I believe it does because Pakistan is one of the world's most conservative Islamic states. Anyway, I'll come back to that. But my contact, my acquaintance, I wouldn't call him a close friend, but he's a guy that I knew a few years back. He then sent me a private message, and it was quite revealing because he said he had to do that because it was not safe for him to speak openly. And as it turns out, he's a pretty open minded guy. He agrees that this situation has to change. I think there's probably many Pakistani people like him who know that this looks awful in the eyes of the world, but until the blasphemy laws are abolished, this situation is not going to change. Now, this guy that I know didn't say he agrees that the blasphemy laws should be abolished. I remember he responded to something like this once before when the student was lynched at Multan University. On that occasion, he said it was awful. But very often, the response that you get, the 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 situation in Pakistan is a deeply, deeply religious country. So moderate in Pakistan would be seen as conservative in other countries. In other words, moderate would be, oh well, it's wrong to murder the accused, but let's try them in a court of law. That's moderate by Pakistani standards. Um, I mean, what happened to Mashal Khan, the young student who was basically beaten to death? It was horrible. And I believe it was the beginning of last year. Just shows the deep intolerance that is there in Pakistani society. But this isn't just Pakistan. You could find similar situations in any conservative Islamic country. And now we're starting to see this creep into countries that were traditionally more moderate. Not to say secular, but they embrace a more moderate form of Islam. Countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, they're starting to now take a hardline path as well, and it's very troubling because it will bring them back to the Dark Ages. Islam is not a tolerant religion. and this shows it. Because if it was, then you would be seeing universal condemnation from other Islamic countries saying this is wrong, this is not Islam. But what you see is a disconnect, because when there is terrorism done in the name of Islam by Islamist groups, then every Islamic government will say, oh, they don't represent Islam, they're just terrorists. Many Muslims will say, oh, they've got nothing to do with Islam, they're just terrorists. But when it comes to religious fanaticism, that isn't necessarily in the form of banned terrorist groups, i.e., when it's mob violence, then you see a different response. Um, So anyone that thinks that the extremism within Islam is just in the form of Al Qaeda and Islamic State, that's wrong, because this is something that is deeply entrenched in Islamic societies. Now, before anyone accuses me of being bigoted, Pakistan's a big country, 200 million people. I never ever generalize any nationality, so I know there are good, open-minded Pakistani people, some very brave people, like the father of Malala Yousafzai, who take great personal risk, like Governor Saman Taseer. So in no way am I, do I have any sort of racist views about Pakistani people, but it's irrefutable that it's a deeply conservative Islamic country, and I will call these thugs what they are, absolute scumbags, absolute religious fanatic scumbags, and they have enormous influence. Now, what my contact said was if the government had the willpower, this could be solved overnight. And he pointed out that the Pakistani military, wiped out Taliban operatives in the mountains within days. The Pakistani military is a pretty powerful military, so they do have the capabilities, I think, to take on the mullahs. Why is the Khan administration not doing this now? His approach to this whole thing, and I don't want to get too much into the party politics of Pakistan, but his supporters will say, oh, he's been condemning it. But is condemnation really enough? These mullahs need to be arrested for inciting violence on the streets. Surely there's something in Pakistani law that would make that legal. They need to be arrested to send out a message. Of course, their supporters will be angry, but frankly, they're always going to be angry. These people are fanatics. They're always going to find a reason to be angry. So I think if the Khan administration is really serious about reforming Pakistan, about getting investment from liberal secular democracies, then it needs to take a very hard line on these mullahs, not just terrorist groups, the mullahs. Arrest them for causing chaos on the streets. Their supporters will run riot, arrest them too. If it means thousands of arrests, so be it. If it means taking military action against these people, so be it. Because at the moment, it seems to be that the religious fanatics are holding the government to ransom. And supposedly the Khan administration is backed by the military. Well, the military has the capabilities to take these people on. There's nothing ever simple about Pakistani politics. Anyone who's followed on any degree recent history of Pakistan knows that it's not an easy country to run, and I appreciate that. I would not expect this to be an easy thing for Imran Khan to do, but he has to show that he's willing to take a hard line in this instead of backtracking. Now, saying that Asia Bibi cannot leave the country is a disgrace, because he's basically sentencing her to be vulnerable to these fanatics. He should allow her to leave and get asylum. If he's worried about embarrassing the image of his country, that's the way it is. It's already embarrassed. It's already seen as backward. Um, if he allowed her to leave, he would be seen as humane. It would make him look good in the eyes of the world. But frankly, until these blasphemy laws are abolished, this situation is going to continue. Why? Because as long as those laws are there will be the perception that someone has broken them. It will be used as a weapon, a bit like the lèse majesté laws are used in Thailand as a political weapon. These blasphemy laws are used to persecute minorities. The way that Christians are treated in Pakistan is appalling. And I do believe that we need to take a very hard line. The British government needs to put its foot down and say, look, Mr. Khan, you either take a hard line on these mullahs or we are cutting foreign aid. There needs to be a message sent out to this country that this sort of primitive behaviour cannot be allowed to continue. It's just, it's horrible. I mean, it's this brainwashed mentality of religious fanaticism. It's terrifying. Individually, these guys are weak, worthless little cards, but as a mob, they're dangerous. And there needs to be some sort of rule of law restored because right now they're rampaging. They're destroying people's property. I don't know if anyone's died so far, but it would not surprise me if they have. And I appreciate nothing is simple about Pakistan. This problem won't be dealt with overnight, but it can begin with a radical step: abolish the blasphemy laws. If Imran Khan done that, if his government done that, I would hold him in very high regard because I would believe that's a politically brave move to make. But more importantly, it's also very important for the future of his country. It wouldn't stop Pakistan being Islamic, but it would stop this hideous law being used to as a weapon, used to persecute minorities, which is exactly what happens. I mean, look what happened to Governor Taseer because he stood up for a Christian woman. He was murdered, assassinated. And what happened to his killer? You know, people say, I've heard Pakistanis say, oh, but the killer was executed. Yeah, but he also got he was treated as a martyr afterwards. So there is a huge disconnect in Pakistan between mob rule and the rule of law. And it seems to me that the governments of Pakistan, the successive governments, are constantly held hostage by these mullahs until someone has the courage to just take them on. Yes, there will be some unrest at first, but surely it's worth it in the long run if it brings Pakistan into some semblance of the 21st century. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that Pakistan's going to become a secular democracy overnight. It's not. Probably never will. But at the very least, there has to be a situation where there's some rule of law. And we can play a part by putting pressure on the Pakistani government, threatening to cut aid unless something is done about this. And we can strongly suggest that Asia Bibi is given asylum. And, you know, critics might say, oh, she'll just become the next Malala. And who's to blame for that? The fanatics who put her into that position in the first place.